The plane's restroom door clicked shut, and my heart stopped. In that cramped, humming space, his breath was too close, his eyes too bold. I wasn't ready for what happened next, but I couldn't turn back. My name is Ethan Caldwell, a 28-year-old flight attendant with Delta, working the red-eye from New York to Los Angeles. I'd seen every type of passenger, rude, anxious, drunk, but none like him. His name was Lucas Harper, seat 12A, a man whose quiet intensity made my pulse race the moment he boarded. Tall, lean, with sharp cheekbones and pale blue eyes that seemed to see through me. He carried a leather jacket slung over one shoulder and a secret in his gaze. I didn't know then that he'd unravel my carefully guarded life in the span of a 5-hour flight. It started at 30,000 feet, somewhere over Ohio. The cabin was dim, most passengers asleep under thin blankets, the hum of the engines a steady lullaby. I was pushing the beverage cart down the aisle, my practiced smile in place, when Lucas's hand grazed mine as I handed him a coffee. His touch lingered, deliberate, and I froze. "Thanks, Ethan," he said, reading my name tag with a voice that was low, almost intimate. My cheeks burned, and I mumbled something incoherent before moving on. I'd spent years perfecting my professional mask, polite, detached, untouchable, but that single touch cracked it. I'd always known I was different. Growing up in a small Ohio town, I hid who I was behind football games and church suppers, terrified of what my family would say if they knew I dreamed of men, not women. I moved to New York at 22, chasing freedom, but even there, I kept my heart locked away. Being a flight attendant meant constant motion, a life of fleeting connections, perfect for avoiding anything real. Until Lucas. He wasn't just another passenger. After the coffee incident, he kept finding excuses to talk. "Is the turbulence normal?" he asked during a bumpy patch, his voice calm but his eyes searching. "Can you recommend a bar in LA?" he said later, leaning closer than necessary. Each interaction felt like a dare, and I was losing the will to resist. By the time I was collecting trash near the end of the flight, my nerves were frayed. I avoided his row, but he stood, stretching, his shirt lifting just enough to reveal a sliver of skin. "Ethan," he said softly, "you're good at this, making people feel safe." I didn't feel safe. I felt like I was falling. The restroom moment came an hour before landing. I was checking the galley when Lucas appeared, his expression unreadable. "Can I talk to you?" he asked, nodding toward the restroom. It was a bold move, reckless even, but the cabin was quiet, the other attendants busy. Against every rule, every instinct, I followed him. The door closed, and the tiny space shrank around us. "I've been watching you," he said, his voice steady but his hands trembling. "I know this is crazy, but I can't stop thinking about you." My breath caught. I should have pushed past him, reported him, done anything but stand there, heart pounding. But his honesty, raw and unguarded, mirrored something I'd buried deep. "This can't happen," I whispered, but my voice betrayed me. He stepped closer and I didn't move. His fingers brushed my wrist, then my jaw, and when his lips met mine, it was like the world tilted. The kiss was desperate, electric, a collision of fear and want. I pulled back, gasping, but his eyes held mine. "I'm sorry," he said, but he wasn't. Neither was I. The plane's descent broke the spell. I stumbled back to the galley, my uniform suddenly too tight, my thoughts a mess. Lucas returned to his seat, and I avoided him for the rest of the flight, but his presence lingered like a bruise. As passengers deplaned in LA, he slipped a note into my hand. "Meet me tonight," it read, with an address for a bar in West Hollywood. I shoved it into my pocket, torn between crumpling it and memorizing it. That night, alone in my hotel room, I stared at the note. I'd spent years running from moments like this, from the risk of being seen. But Lucas had seen me, and I wasn't sure I could go back to hiding. The bar's address burned in my mind, a choice I wasn't ready to make but couldn't ignore. I didn't know then that meeting him would spark a chain of events that would test everything I believed about love, courage, and myself. The neon sign of the Rusty Anchor buzzed above the entrance, casting a red glow over the West Hollywood street. I stood outside, Lucas's note crumpled in my fist, my heart a war zone of doubt and desire. Walking into that bar felt like stepping off a cliff, but I'd already fallen once in that restroom, and some part of me wanted to keep falling. Inside, the air was thick with laughter and clinking glasses. The crowd was a mix of locals and tourists, but I spotted Lucas immediately, leaning against the bar with that same leather jacket, his eyes scanning the room until they found me. He smiled, a slow, knowing curve that made my stomach flip. "You came," he said as I approached, his voice cutting through the noise like it was just us. I nodded, words stuck in my throat. He ordered me a whiskey, and we sat in a corner booth, the world shrinking to the space between us. Lucas was 29, a freelance photographer from Chicago, in LA for a gallery show. He talked about capturing moments, grief, joy, truth, in a way that felt like he was describing me. "I saw you on that plane," he said, leaning closer, "and I knew you were hiding something. I wanted to know what." His words hit too close, peeling back layers I'd spent years building. I told him about Ohio, about the fear that still clung to me like damp clothes, about why I kept everyone at arm's length. He listened, really listened, and it terrified me how much I wanted to keep talking. The night blurred into stolen glances and quiet confessions. He told me about his own past, a conservative family, a coming out that cost him their love, a life rebuilt from the ashes. "I don't hide anymore," he said, his hand resting on mine. "You shouldn't have to either." I wanted to believe him, but fear was a reflex, and I pulled my hand back. "I could lose my job," I said. Us, it's reckless." He didn't argue, just watched me with those piercing eyes, like he saw the man I could be if I stopped running. We left the bar after midnight, walking through streets alive with music and possibility. At a quiet corner, he kissed me again, softer this time, under a flickering street lamp. Felt like a promise, but promises scared me. "Come to my show tomorrow," he said, scribbling the gallery address on a napkin. "See who I am." I took the napkin, my fingers trembling, and watched him disappear into the night. Back at my hotel, I couldn't sleep. The napkin sat on the nightstand, a challenge I wasn't sure I could meet. My phone buzzed with a text from my coworker, Sarah, asking where I'd been. I ignored it, but guilt crept in. If anyone at Delta found out about Lucas, about the restroom, my career could end. Flight attendants were supposed to be professional, not reckless. But Lucas wasn't just a passenger anymore. He was a mirror, reflecting a life I'd never dared to claim. The next day, I went to the gallery. It was a small space in Silver Lake, filled with black and white photos that stopped me cold. Lucas's work was raw, portraits of people caught in moments of vulnerability, their stories etched in their faces. One photo, a man staring at the camera with quiet defiance, felt like it was me. Lucas found me standing there, his smile hesitant. "What do you think?" he asked. I couldn't answer, too overwhelmed by the truth he'd captured. Instead, I kissed him right there in the gallery, consequences be damned. But reality wasn't far behind. As we left, I noticed a man watching us from across the street, his phone raised like he was taking pictures. My stomach dropped. "Lucas," I said, grabbing his arm. "Someone's following us." His face hardened, and he pulled me into an alley, his voice low. "I've had this before," he said. "People who don't like what I am." Fear surged, but so did something else, anger. I wasn't just scared for myself anymore. I was scared for us. The alley smelled of damp concrete and regret. Lucas's hand was tight on mine as we ducked behind a dumpster, the sound of footsteps echoing too close. "Stay quiet," he whispered, but my heart was louder than the city. The man from the street passed by, his silhouette sharp against the neon glow, phone still in hand. I didn't know if he was a random bigot or someone with a purpose, but the fear was the same. I'd spent my life avoiding moments like this, and now I was in one, with Lucas's breath warm against my neck. When the footsteps faded, we slipped back onto the street, moving fast. Lucas's apartment was a few blocks away, a small loft cluttered with camera gear and prints. Inside, he locked the door and turned to me, his face pale but determined. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't think—" I cut him off, my voice shaking. "This is why I don't do this. Why I can't." But even as I said it, I was stepping closer, drawn to him like gravity. He didn't apologize again. Instead, he pulled me into his arms, and for a moment, the world outside didn't exist. We talked until dawn, sprawled on his couch, sharing stories we'd never told anyone. He showed me a scar on his wrist from a fight in high school, when kids called him names I knew too well. I told him about the night I almost came out to my dad, how his silence when I hinted at it kept me quiet for years. With every word, the walls I'd built crumbled, and I let myself imagine a life where I didn't have to hide. But imagination wasn't reality, and reality was a text from Sarah. "Heard a rumor about you and a passenger. Be careful." My blood ran cold. Rumors spread fast in the airline world, and this one could ruin me. Lucas saw my face and took my phone, reading the message. "You don't have to go back," he said. "Stay here, with me." It was a fantasy, tempting but impossible. I had a life, a job, a carefully constructed shield. "I can't just run away," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. He kissed me, slow and deliberate, like he was trying to anchor me to this moment. The next day, I was back on a flight to New York, my mind a tangle of Lucas and fear. Sarah pulled me aside during boarding. "People are talking," she said, her eyes sharp. "Someone saw you in LA with a guy." I lied, said it was a friend, but her skepticism cut deep. I spent the flight avoiding her, avoiding everyone, my thoughts on Lucas. He texted me a photo from his gallery, the one of the defiant man with a caption, "This is you. Don't forget." I wanted to believe him, but doubt was a habit. In New York, I found a voicemail from my supervisor, Karen. "Ethan, we need to talk. Come to the office tomorrow." My stomach dropped. I didn't know how much she knew, but the timing wasn't a coincidence. I called Lucas, my voice shaking. "I think I'm in trouble," I said. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Come back to LA. We'll figure it out together." It was reckless, irrational, but I booked a flight for the next day, my heart racing with something that felt like hope. When I landed in LA, Lucas was waiting at the gate, his smile a lifeline. But as we left the airport, I saw the same man from the gallery, watching us again. This time he wasn't alone. Another man stood with him, both in dark jackets, their faces unreadable. "Lucas," I said, my voice tight. "They're back." His jaw clenched and he grabbed my hand. "We're not hiding," he said, but his eyes betrayed his fear. We didn't know who they were, but they knew us, and that was enough to make my world feel like it was closing in. The LA night was warm, but I felt cold as Lucas pulled me into a cab. The men didn't follow, but their presence lingered like a shadow. "Who are they?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Lucas shook his head, his hand still gripping mine. "I don't know. Maybe someone from my past. Or yours." The idea that this could be about me, about the restroom, the kiss, the rumors, made my chest tighten. I'd crossed a line on that plane, and now the consequences were chasing us. At his apartment, we sat in silence, the weight of the unknown pressing down. Lucas poured us coffee, his hands steady despite everything. "I've dealt with hate before," he said, his voice low. "After I came out, I got threats, lost friends. But I never let it stop me." I envied his courage, his defiance. I'd spent my life dodging conflict, keeping my head down. "I'm not like you," I said. "I'm not brave." He took my face in his hands, his eyes fierce. "You're here, Ethan. That's braver than you think." His words stayed with me as I faced Karen's call the next morning. She was curt, professional, but her tone was a warning. "We've had a complaint," she said. "A passenger reported inappropriate behavior on your last flight to LA. You need to come in for a meeting." My heart sank. I knew it was about Lucas, about the restroom. Someone had seen us or heard something, and now my job, my life, was on the line. I told Lucas, expecting him to pull back, to see the mess I'd made. Instead, he said, "We'll face it together. You're not alone." The meeting was in New York, but I couldn't leave LA yet. Lucas had a lead on the men following us, a friend who recognized one of them as a private investigator. "Someone hired them," Lucas said, his voice grim. "Could be my family trying to drag me back. Or your airline, digging for dirt." The thought of Delta investigating me made me sick. I'd broken their rules, crossed a line no flight attendant could cross. But Lucas wasn't just a passenger anymore. He was the reason I was starting to believe in something bigger than fear. We spent the day digging for answers, Lucas calling contacts while I searched online for anything about private investigators in LA. We found nothing concrete, but the tension grew. That night, at a diner near his place, we sat across from each other, trying to pretend things were normal. He reached for my hand, and I let him, even though every instinct screamed to pull away. "Whatever happens," he said, "I'm not letting you go." I wanted to believe him, but the world felt like it was closing in, and I wasn't sure we could outrun it. The next morning, I got an email from an unknown address. It was a photo of me and Lucas at the gallery, our hands touching, with a single line, "We know what you did." My hands shook as I showed Lucas. His face darkened, but he didn't flinch. "They want to scare us," he said. "Don't let them win." But fear was winning. I had a life to lose. My job, my stability, everything I'd built to keep myself safe. Lucas was asking me to risk it all, and I wasn't sure I could. I flew back to New York for the meeting, leaving Lucas with a promise to return. Karen's office was sterile, her face unreadable as she laid out the complaint. A passenger in first class had seen me enter the restroom with Lucas, had heard rumors from the crew. "This is serious, Ethan," she said. "If this is true, you're done." I wanted to lie, to save myself, but Lucas's voice echoed in my head. "Don't hide." I took a breath and told the truth, not the whole truth, but enough. "I met someone," I said. "It wasn't planned, but it's real." Her eyes softened, just for a moment, but the verdict was clear. I was suspended, pending investigation. Back in LA, Lucas was waiting at the airport, his face a mix of worry and relief. I told him about the suspension, the investigation, the photo from the unknown sender. He pulled me into a hug, right there in the terminal, and for the first time I didn't care who saw. "We'll figure this out," he said, and I believed him because I had to. The alternative, going back to a life of hiding, was worse than any consequence. We tracked down the private investigator through Lucas's friend, a hacker who traced the email to a firm hired by an anonymous client. The trail led to Chicago, to Lucas's family, who'd never accepted his truth. They'd hired the investigators to dig up dirt, to force him back into their control. But the photo of us wasn't just about Lucas, it was about me too. Someone at Delta had tipped them off, likely a crew member who'd heard the rumors. The betrayal stung, but Lucas's hand in mine kept me grounded. We confronted the investigator at a coffee shop, a tense meeting where he admitted he'd been paid to scare us, not hurt us. "They want you to stop," he said to Lucas, glancing at me. "Both of you." I felt rage, not just at them, but at myself for all the years I'd let fear win. Lucas squeezed my hand, his voice steady. "Tell them we're not stopping," he said. The investigator left, and we sat there, two men against a world that didn't always want us to exist. The airline's investigation dragged on, but I didn't wait for their verdict. I quit not because I was guilty, but because I was done pretending. I moved to LA, renting a tiny apartment near Lucas's loft. We built a life, piece by piece. Nights at the Rusty Anchor, mornings editing his photos, moments where I learned to love without fear. It wasn't perfect. My family stopped calling when I came out, and Lucas's past still haunted him. But we had each other, and that was enough. One night, a year later, we stood on the tarmac where I'd first landed in LA, the same one from the image prompt. Lucas had a camera, capturing me against the plane's silhouette. "You're my best shot," he said, grinning. I laughed, pulling him close, the moon above us a witness to a love we'd fought for. The world hadn't changed, but we had. We'd crossed a line in that plane restroom, and it led us here, to a life where we didn't have to hide, where love was worth every risk. The story of us wasn't just about a kiss or a scandal. It was about courage, about choosing truth over safety, about two people who found each other at 30,000 feet and refused to let go. And as Lucas's camera clicked, freezing this moment, I knew we'd keep fighting, not just for us, but for everyone who deserved to love without fear. That was the meaning we'd found, the one we'd carry forward, together.